We're going to be talking about leadership, and I want you to see, to begin with, we're covering a very specialized area of skill. Because leadership is often confused, particularly in the church, with two other things that are quite different. One of them is management. Management is not leadership. Most of the leadership seminars I've been at or read about actually don't teach leadership at all. They teach management techniques. Now, management techniques are necessary. Management is the stewardship of resources, if you like. Very few leaders are good managers. They have to get managers to do that job for them. But don't think by learning management techniques that will make you become a good leader. Quite different capacities, okay? The second thing in the church is we often confuse leadership with ministry. So if you want to choose a leader for a church organization, you find somebody with an outstanding ministry. And sometimes you find a leader who has failed and doesn't know why he's failed. He's got a very good ministry, gives his ministry all he's got. The only thing he's failed to do is to give what he's supposed to give, and that is leadership. So we're talking in, I'm not saying that leadership is more important than management, more important than ministry, but I'm saying as far as our seminar is concerned, we're not talking about either of these, we're talking about this business of leadership. But it underlines the fact that before we go any further, we need to understand what leadership is. Okay? Right, here's the first thing. Leadership has to do with goals and direction. In other words, if you are a leader, the first question I'd want to know from you is, where are you heading? If we're just responding to situations as they come up, crisis management, we're not leading at all, actually. Circumstances are leading. They're determining where we're going, see. So leadership has to do with goals and directions, therefore it is essentially future-oriented. If you look at the general level of management in business and look at the time, the proportion of a manager's time spent on planning, that is to do with the future, you find something like this. First level management would spend, a first level supervisor would spend probably only about 5% of his time on planning, thinking about the future. Second level, middle management, would spend about 10%. Operating managers would spend at least 25%. When you get to top management, the CEO ought to spend 50% or more of his time with his hands behind his head, his feet on his desk, thinking about what? About the future, where things are going to. So leadership rather is essentially future-oriented. The leader is concerned about what's not here yet. I believe that many of these capacities we're talking about at this stage are innate. Because being future-oriented, this whole thing here has to do with vision. And to be a leader, you need to some extent to be a visionary. Now, as you'll see as we go on, to be a visionary is a necessary qualification for leadership, but it is not a sufficient qualification for leadership. Leaders have to be, in some sense, a visionary, but being a visionary does not necessarily make you a leader. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, the capacity that the leader has to handle the future is a thing called foresight. And you could put it this way. If you're a leader, that means you have a lead over other people. What is the nature of your lead? The lead that the leader has is he's supposed to be better at pointing direction to the future. See? To be better at anticipating what's likely to happen in the future. Better than other people at making sense of the future. That's his essential capacity. And if he's not doing that, he's not really leading. Let me just show you something before we go on. There are actually 4 areas with which leaders have to be concerned in an organization. And they have to give adequate input into all 4 of these areas. The first area is the question of task or mission. That is, what is the organization to do? Where are they going? What are their objectives? So the leader's job is to clarify the objectives, to anticipate possibilities and opportunities in the future, and so on. He's concerned with the mission of the organization. Secondly, he's concerned with the group. That is, with coordinating the resources that are in the group, with handling conflict within the group, with building group dynamics, relationships within the group. This is the best indicator of morale, one way or other, in an organization, the state of relationships within the organization. So leaders have to be concerned with the group. Thirdly, they have to be concerned with the individual, because groups are made up of individuals. And the task of the leader is to help the individual to discover the potential that God has placed in his life, to give him or her opportunities to achieve that potential, and to steward him so that the things that stand in the way of him reaching that potential are dealt with. So as leaders, you have to be concerned with the individual. Fourthly, there's an area in here which is actually the corporate spirit of the organization. Its culture, if you like, its personality, the heart of the organization. And that needs to be tended and nourished. We're going to spend some time on that in one of the later sessions. But this is the point I want to make. If there is imbalance about input into these areas, you're going to strike problems. The leader, in dealing with the future, is operating with a wider than normal span of awareness. I'll explain what I mean. The leader has to operate with a wider than normal span of awareness. That is to say, when you're considering the future, you have to take into account not just hard data. You need to take into account hard data. You need hard data. But there's more there to make up the picture. In other words, you're dealing with things like opinions, things like impressions, hints, things like intuitions, very insubstantial stuff. But all that helps to make part of the total picture if you're going to make sense about what's going to happen. And if you look at a leader who is good at his job and you examine the way he operates, you'll discover that's what's actually happening. He takes into account things that other people wouldn't consider at all. He's got hunches. He has a kind of intuitive feeling. He's got imagination, as Dan was mentioning. All that is part of the picture. Now, I'm not saying that all of those carry equal weight, but what I am saying is they all have their place, and we need to operate so that all of them are received and provide part of the input we need to make sense of the future.